She took care of me in a coma, but I never knew her name. When I woke up from a 6-month coma, I came back with a memory that felt more like a dream. It was a voice, a gentle touch, a feeling of calm in the middle of all the chaos. I knew this person had been with me, that she'd cared for me, and I honestly believe she saved my life. But when I asked who she was, nobody knew. I don't know her name, I've never even seen her face, but I knew I had to find her. This is that story. Section 1. The Awakening. You know they say waking up from a coma isn't like it is in the movies. It's not a switch you just flip. For me, it was this slow, terrifying crawl back to the world. At first, it was just a thick fog of confusion. Sounds were muffled, the lights were blinding, and my own body felt like a cage I was trapped inside. For weeks, I was just drifting in and out of a state that wasn't really sleep, but it wasn't being awake either. All I knew was the constant beeping, the hiss of machines, and the low murmur of voices that sounded miles away. My brain was scrambled from the accident, struggling to piece reality back together. They told me I had post-traumatic amnesia, which means my mind was awake, but it wasn't recording anything, leaving this huge black hole in my timeline. Doctors say it's rare for people in my state to form clear memories, which made the one thing I did remember feel even more important. In that confusing emptiness, there was one constant, one anchor. It wasn't a sharp memory. Not at first. It was a feeling, a sense of presence, a hand that would adjust my pillow just right, easing the pressure in my head, a cool cloth on my forehead, and a voice. It was a woman's voice, soft and steady. She didn't talk to me like I was gone. She spoke to me like I was just resting. She'd tell me about her day, the weather, something funny her cat did, and she would hum. It was the same song, every single time, a simple, quiet melody that somehow cut through all the noise of the ICU. In a world of terrifying hallucinations, it was the only thing that felt real. That humming became my lighthouse in the storm. It was the thread I followed back to the world. When I was finally lucid enough to talk, my first question was, who was she? My family, my mom, dad, my sister, they'd been there constantly, but they just remembered a revolving door of doctors and nurses. They were so focused on me surviving, on the numbers on the monitors, that the individuals just blurred into a sea of scrubs. All the nurses were wonderful, sweetheart, my mom would say, her face full of worry. Of course they were grateful to everyone, but nobody could place the woman I was describing. None of them hummed that song. The hospital couldn't help. Patient charts track medications and procedures, not quiet conversations and melodies. To them, she was probably just one of dozens of nurses, maybe a temp from an agency who was there for a few weeks and then gone. But to me, she was everything. In the darkest moment of my life, she offered a simple human kindness that I was sure had pulled me through. The gratitude I felt was a physical weight. I couldn't just move on with my second chance at life without finding her. I had to know her name. Section 2. The Search. My search started right where my old life ended, and my new one began, the hospital. Walking back into those sterile hallways was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every smell, every sound just brought it all back, the phantom pains and the sheer terror of those first few weeks. But I had to do it. I got a meeting with the charge nurse who ran the ICU during my stay. She was kind but practical. She pulled up my file, a giant stack of paper detailing the catastrophe my body had been. She explained how a busy ICU works. The long hours, the high turnover, the constant rotation of staff. Dozens of people would have been part of my care. Maybe a traveling nurse, I asked, holding on to that little bit of hope. It's possible, she said, we use them all the time, but their contracts are short, and their agencies handle their records. They could be from anywhere in the country. That was my first major dead end. I left the hospital feeling defeated, the memory of her feeling more like a ghost than ever. For a few weeks, I tried to let it go. I focused on my PT, on learning to walk without a limp, on dealing with the frustrating gaps my brain injury left behind. But at night, in the quiet, I'd hear the echo of that melody. I just couldn't let it rest. My next idea was based on the one clue that felt real, the song. I didn't know the name of it. It was simple, almost like a lullaby. I spent hours online, humming the tune into music ID apps, searching for simple folk lullabies and old quiet melodies. Nothing. It was a nameless tune from a nameless woman. Have you ever been haunted by a memory you just can't place? It's a special kind of torture. That feeling drove me to my next step, which was a lot more public. I decided to tell my story. I started a little blog and wrote one post, The Humming Angel of the ICU. I put everything in there, the accident, the coma, the feeling of being trapped, and the gentle presence that kept me grounded. I listed the few things I knew for sure: the hospital, the rough dates of my stay, and the melody. I even recorded myself humming the tune, this pathetic, desperate little audio clip, and put it in the post. I shared it on social media and asked my friends to pass it on, not expecting much. But then something amazing happened. The story started to spread, first to friends of friends, then to local news sites. It got picked up by online nursing communities and caregiver support groups. The response was overwhelming. I got hundreds of messages. Most were just words of support. Others were from people sharing their own stories of kindness from strangers. A few were false leads, nurses who thought it might be them, but the details never quite lined up. It was emotionally draining. Every new lead was a surge of hope that was usually followed by disappointment. My family worried I was chasing a ghost, that I was stuck in the past. But I couldn't stop. I felt like I was getting closer. The community rallying around me was real, and I had to believe that someone somewhere would recognize the story, or even better, the song. Section 3, The Discovery. The breakthrough came almost a year into my search. It wasn't some big dramatic moment. It was just a quiet email in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was simple: the song you were looking for. The email was from a woman named Maria, a retired nurse who'd worked at that same hospital for 30 years. She said she hadn't been in the ICU when I was there, but she recognized the melody I hummed. It wasn't a famous song. It was a lullaby her grandmother, who was an immigrant from Portugal, used to sing to her. She said she knew one other nurse who used to hum it, a woman named Elena. Maria told me Elena was quiet, dedicated, and had a habit of humming when she was focused or trying to soothe a patient. She was a traveling nurse who had taken a 6-month contract at the hospital to be near her own aging mother. She'd left shortly after I woke up. Maria didn't have her contact info, but she knew her last name, and she knew that after her mother passed away, Elena had moved back to her small hometown in Oregon. With a name and a location, the ghost I'd been chasing suddenly started to feel real. A quick online search gave me one result. A small community garden in a town of just a few thousand people had a volunteer profile for an Elena Marquez. The photo showed a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, smiling as she held a basket of tomatoes. It was a face I'd never seen, but it felt familiar. After a few phone calls, I had her number. Making that call was maybe the most nerve-wracking moment of my life. My hands were shaking. What if she didn't remember me? What if I'd just built this all up in my head? A soft voice answered. "Hello?" I took a deep breath. "Is this Elena?" I asked. I explained who I was: the accident, the hospital, the coma. I could hear her just listening patiently on the other end. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said, "My goodness, I remember you. I remember your family. I worried about you after I left." She didn't remember every little detail I clung to. For her, I was one of many patients she had poured her heart into caring for. But she remembered sitting with me. She remembered how young I was, and the fear in my family's eyes. And when I asked her about the song, she laughed softly. "It's just a silly song my avo used to sing," she said. "I hum it without even thinking. I find it calms my nerves. I was hoping it might calm yours, too." Conclusion. We talked for over an hour. I finally got to say the words I'd been holding on to for 2 years. "Thank you. You saved my life." She was so humble, insisting she was just doing her job, what any good nurse would do. But to me, it was so much more than that. A few weeks later, I flew to Oregon. I met her in that community garden from her profile picture. Seeing her face to face was surreal. It wasn't a big, tearful reunion. It was quieter than that. It was warm. I gave her a small, framed picture of a lighthouse to thank her for being mine. She gave me a hug that felt just as comforting as I had always imagined. This journey was never just about finding a stranger. It was about finding closure. It was about proving to myself that the kindness I felt in that dark place was real. It taught me that sometimes the most important connections we make happen in silence when we're at our most vulnerable. My search for Elena is over, but I'll carry the lesson of her quiet, powerful kindness with me forever. If this story meant something to you, maybe you could share it. You never know who else out there has been touched by a stranger's kindness. If you have a story like this, I'd love to read it in the comments. Thanks for listening.